So, hi guys, Tim and Toby back for the series on how Germany lost the war. This is episode 4, D-Day, but this is part 2 of the actual official landings and everything to do with the landings itself. So, last episode, or last part really, part 1 we looked at the preparation for D-Day and everything. So part 2 we'll be looking at, of course, as I said earlier, the official landings and everything which goes around with it. So, as I said earlier, as I said in the last episode, just wrapping that, last part, wrapping that up, is at 5:15, the British 9-inch naval guns fired at the on the German Atlantic Wall, where Normandy is, the beach, to soften up the Germans. Then, an hour and 15 minutes later, the landings went on with the American 1st Infantry Division, the big red one, at Omaha Beach, which, it was dreadful on Omaha Beach. The Americans thought the British that had fired the 9-inch guns, the naval guns, had done its trick, but they hadn't, because the German defences specifically were strengthened at Omaha Beach were far greater than, with the Canadians at Gold, at the area, they were the two which were strengthened. Juno, the Canadians at Juno Beach sector was strengthened, as well as Omaha Beach as well. Very great dugouts. But if we go back to the morning of the 6th of June, when it was pitch black over Pegasus Bridge and over places like that, the Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire Light Infantry, or the 2nd Battalion, connected to that, who were attached to the Airborne Division, landed their gliders down at what was called Bruneval Bridge, or would later be known as Pegasus Bridge, because of the insignia on the Airborne Division insignia there, which is a Pegasus horse. Was captured in 15 minutes of them, actually, of the British Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire Light Infantry Airborne Division landing and securing the bridge. 15 minutes it took, which was very, very good, very quick. So what I've got here is the cap badge of what would be worn on the reddy maroon coloured beret of those who went into action at around 1:30 in the morning on the 6th of June to capture Bruneval or Pegasus Bridge. So the airborne divisions had to basically cut off the bridges so the Germans couldn't escape, so they basically get rounded up and they couldn't bring in more troops. Or the Germans would blow the bridges themselves so the Allies couldn't cross. That's why the Allies had to take them very early on, very, very early on, in the middle of the night, the night, or really the darkness of the day on the 6th of June 44. So this is the cap badge of the Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire Light Infantry. So Toby's going to talk to us about the American airborne part at St Mary Glees and St Lo around the same time in the morning. So, Toby?
Yes. So the American airborne operation was, I wouldn't say harder, but there were very many different challenges. So, to start with, however, there are a few myths, actually, which I am going to now debunk, I think. So, yes, a lot of the airborne troops were scattered around a bit, but for the most part, they weren't actually scattered too badly. And when you hear the, horrific stories of people drowning, in the swamps, the Allies didn't actually know these swamps were there, which is why they dropped them in the right place, but it was the wrong place because the Germans had recently flooded that entire territory over there. So, they land 101st and 82nd, very famous, the Screaming Eagles and the All-American, and they end up really getting confused then, because it was pitch black. They were all, in individual groups. I've heard of someone actually coming down right on top of a German headquarters like not like most films have it like a big chateau or something, but like just a standard dugout thing with radios. Landed pretty much on top of that. Another one landed right in front, and I mean so close he could actually look at the muzzle flash over him of a German machine gun position. And as a result, communication basically broke down, and they, very luckily, they all grouped together and eventually pretty much completely destroyed the Germans in that area. But that wasn't over yet. What was it called? Going out onto the Cotonou Peninsula, there were several bridges which they had to hold, and they really had to hold these. So the Germans were constantly counter-attacking, trying to go across the bridge, and they were running out of ammunition and medical supplies, so the conditions were getting really, really worse by the hour. And then, unexpectedly to them, the Germans in the area actually had tanks. Now, these were not Tigers or anything. These were literally French-captured H-35 tanks, which are quite slow, but they have pretty strong cast armour, which meant that they were pretty difficult to take out. But luckily, one of them still had a bazooka, and they used this bazooka, pretty similar when you think about it to the very famous story of some kind of vehicle getting taken out near Buenville, near Pegasus Bridge. It was pretty famous, that one, not so much this, but they were able to knock out all three of them, and the rest of the Germans retreated, and this basically stopped the Germans rushing in loads of reinforcements to Utah and Omaha and many other places. The second little myth I would also like to debunk a bit is, a lot of people, for some reason, seem to think that the entire operation was just complete madness and just complete chaos. Yes, there were elements of disorganisation and all kinds of stuff like that, but it really wasn't, the kind of mass mayhem. Yes, it was mayhem, you get what I mean. It wasn't like uncontrolled, though. The Americans had a plan, and because they were better trained, I would say, than the Germans, they stuck to that plan and basically overwhelmed the Germans in that area. And that's something that will continue throughout the entire Normandy campaign. The Germans, they were disciplined, but there's a difference between discipline and well-trained, and I think that's been lost over the years, partly. So back to Tim.
Alright, thanks Toby. So if we go back to the 2nd Battalion, Oxfordshire, Buckinghamshire Light Infantry, who were already fighting their own battle at Brunaville Bridge or Pegasus Bridge, they had to wait until members of the Highlanders had to basically relieve them coming off shore from Sword Beach. So if we just go back to the beach landing itself, there were basically sectors of areas of the beach targeted for different different countries that you can kind of call America, Canada, Britain, including Scotland as well. So the Americans went first at 6:30, around about 6:30 a.m. that was, and that was Omaha and technically Utah and then Omaha. Then you got in the middle with the Canadians at Juno Beach. They went roughly about 6:45, 7 o'clock. Then you had the British at Gold and Sword, who went around. Well, Sword Beach was about 7:25. Gold Beach was the landings was about 7:30, 7:35. That's about that. They're all the times of the landings, and these are these different. Of course, there are individual sectors in the specific sectors itself, but I mean these are the main sectors. So once the American and British had actually landed with the 157,000 troops and actually got a bridgehead on the beach itself, they started to intertwine and mix up basically into different groups. So kind of, British and American and Canadian groups all got together and kind of funneled through into into kind of different areas. So the Canadians went through Bayeux, which I've been to Bayeux itself, the village. At Sword Beach, the British went straight to Caen. Then the Americans, kind of when they landed, the 29th Infantry Division and the Big Red One, the 1st Infantry Division, went east towards Cherbourg as well, as was the 101st Airborne Division, to link up with the main assault troops at Cherbourg, and then drive right around, cutting right through the Americans as well. So that is really, in a nutshell, that's the landings. Pardon me. So that's the landings on the 6th of June, 1944. All started at with the Americans at 6:30. Yes, Toby?
I did also want to add one thing that is also an interesting fact, nonetheless, of D-Day, is a lot of the German divisions at that stage were actually made up of what's known as Ost battalions, or Osttruppen, which is basically conscripts from Soviet prisoners of war in there. And a couple of stories I've heard, one of them ended up, because one of them the German officer gestured to kind of test a flare gun, open it. He thought he meant and it fired into his chest and really quite badly wounded him. So, that's the issue with the German army, is most of it, or some of it at least on D-Day, couldn't really even speak German, and then most of it was just absolute conscripts who really didn't want to be there, at least in the front of, big Allied assault.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll let Tim sign this one off, so see you then.
Yeah, just before actually you end, going back to your kind of conscripts, you actually had Indian volunteers who volunteered for the German army, known as the Indian Legion, and basically right from 1790 right up to 1947, Britain, and of course during both World Wars, Britain had been colonising its troops and had colonised India. So at the time, India really didn't like Britain, being in India at the time, so a lot of them took their hatred out on Britain by volunteering on the German side. There's a very famous photo of dressed up in M43 German tunics, but having a hijab, very famous Indian kind of headgear, firing down, I believe, an MG34 or maybe an MG42, down to, it might have been the British or the Americans who landed on the beach, but they were the members of the Indian Legion who basically took it out on the British for, colonising India back in the 1790s. So, yes, that's been the part 2 of episode 4, which is D-Day, or more specifically the landings themselves. So, so after the Americans entered Cherbourg and the British at Caen and the Canadians at Bayeux, we will then, in part 3, look at those little bits and the actual main breakout itself right up to the end at Falaise. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next part. So bye.